Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. This is Comic Cuts. I'm Steve Holland. This is about the 8th or 9th time I've done Comic Cuts on video. We started in the middle of April. It's now the tail end of May. I think this issue is for May the 29th. I'm hoping that you're enjoying these. I never expected them to attract a huge amount of attention, certainly. We've got a few dozen viewers each week, and that's rather nice. But we've evolved slightly over the weeks. I did attempt to do Q&As, but there were a number of technical problems that I was faced with that made them almost impossible to do. If you've seen some of the older videos, you'll understand what I mean. Last week I did our first video interview, and we've got another one for you this week. This interview is with Peter Duncan, who has edited the Splank annual. It's a very worthy annual. You can download it for free, but there is a secondary purpose of raising money for the NHS Together charity, so you can also go to the Just Giving page and donate some money there. It's a very good book. It's 160 pages. There's a good mixture of stories, some action stories, some humour stories, a big dose of weirdness from Grumpy Penguins and Cthulhu Kids, and it's worth your while. It's worth going to have a look. I mean, it's free. Go to the Get My Comics website and download your copy now. Okay. So, we're going to go to the split screen thing now, which is me and Peter having a little chat. He will explain everything. And I'll come back at the end to try and justify why I've done so little work this week. There'll be the usual excuses, but the big one is that there was a bank holiday. Anyway, I'm going to move over to one side and we will talk to Peter Duncan. Well, thank you, Peter. Perhaps we could start by explaining what Splank means.
Yes, Splank came about whenever I retired from work. I had a medical condition that forced me to retire, and I started a comics blog called Splank. And Splank was first posted about on the 1st of April 2016. And it was a mythical version of the old Autumn's comic Pow, where one of the issues that Mike Higgs had done the cover to talked about the character called the Leprechaun. I claimed that the Irish felt that was offensive, and they had created their own version, changing the name on the villain to Samuel Beckett. And Splank was supposed to have been the onomatopoeic sound of someone being hit over the head with a damp piece of wood. It started off as that blog entry, and I kind of thought I'd quite like to do a comic. And the comic that I started to work on was one that was, if you like, a modern version of Pow or Smash or Wham, which are the comics that I still regard as the finest British comics that have ever existed, with mixing Leo Baxendale and Mike Higgs and mixing that with Marvel superheroes. It was the comic that the 7-year-old me was totally obsessed with. And so that's where Splank started. Splank took a long time to come out. It took 2 years for the first issue and the only issue until now to come out. And in the meantime, I got involved with a 2008 fanzine called Sector 13, which kind of took over. And Splank, the comic, I approached lots of cartoonists who I really admired and got work from them. So we have Davy Francis from Belfast, who used to work on Oink. Nigel Parkinson was in the original issue, and most especially Mike Higgs, who I was able to contact through another cartoonist who put me in contact with Mike, and Mike did revived the cloak for me and put me in the comic strip, and also wrote or he rewrote and drew the first script I ever wrote as a comic, which is called Ninja Monkey, both of which are in the new annual. And from there I worked mainly on Sector 13, the fanzine, and on another title that one of the guys, that a strip that was created for Splank turned into 2 issues of a Kickstarter comic and a card game. and that was the Cthulhu Kids. So that's where we got to. The first issue of Splank came out in 2018, and I've always wanted to do another one, but it never actually happened because of the work on the other things.
Sector 13 is very different to Splank. Splank is essentially a humour comic, whereas Sector 13 is almost a multimedia comic. I mean, using fumetti and all sorts. You know, sort of like you've gathered together an astonishing crowd of people to work on that.
Sector 13 started for what was Belfast 2000 AD fans wanted to do something for the 40th anniversary. And we had the group I belonged to had a very strong cosplayer group. And we wanted to do something with the cosplayers. So the photo stories were for the cosplayers. And they're our friends from the group who are in that. And that was sort of the start. The first issue was produced for Enniskillen Comics Fest, which for the 40th anniversary had an absolutely fantastic set of events and a brilliant event. And we launched there with the first issue. And we're now on issue, can I remember? Because it's some difficult. We're now on issue 6, because I'm working on issue 7. It's sometimes difficult. And as we went on, I think we got more and more ambitious. And we discovered that the amount of particularly artistic talent out there is absolutely fantastic. We have some artists who are definitely of professional quality working for us. I think the problem is the British comics industry is very small and there isn't room for all the really talented people. So we're very lucky in that we can get lots of people to come along and do really, really good work for us. But we're always going to have those photo stories because that's the group that started it, and we like the idea of the photo stories. They're put together by a guy called Lawrence McKenna, and Lawrence is learning all the time, and they're getting better and better. And we've now merged the stories so that there is a set of stories by Scott Tweels as the artist, and Scott draws the cosplayers in a very, very different style. And we like that crossover, that stories cross over between each other.
It looks astonishing, and more power to your elbow. I hope you can keep it up and keep it going.
It's great fun, and it's a very social group that get together. Until this all started, we got together every Tuesday and had what we called an editorial meeting, but really we had a few drinks and had a bit of fun, and that was the main part of it. So we'll keep going as long as we can.
Good for you. You've decided to bring Splank back for a good cause as well. So perhaps you could tell us about the Splank Annual and the cause that you're trying to raise money for.
Just a few weeks ago, about probably 2 months ago, sort of when the COVID-19 thing was at its height here in Belfast, I was taken ill with the condition that caused me to retire. Where my heart decides to be a jazz drummer instead of doing ordinary 4/4 time, and I had to go into the hospital. And obviously I was very worried about that. But the interaction I had with the NHS was, as it always has been, absolutely impeccable. Right from the ambulance driver, one of whom was a senior manager who hadn't been in the thick of things for 10 years, who had come back because of the situation. He was brilliant. He looked after the guy who was with him, who was in his first week in the job, and he made sure that guy was in charge, and he didn't step on his toes. They were brilliant. Right through to the whole procedure in the hospital, I was stunned by how good they were, and that there was no difference for me other than they kept further away from me, and whenever they were talking to me, there were masks. But there was one particular incident where there was an old lady who, because of the rules around COVID, was on her own. And she was very distressed and very confused. So you had two nurses, one of whom was very young, who were having to deal with and cope with that woman at the same time as keeping their distance, at the same time as putting their own lives at risk. And by the time I left, that old lady was laughing with them. And it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in terms of just compassion and care. And I thought I have to do something. So at the same time, I was also looking at my friends who are artists, and with all the cons disappearing, their income was being decimated. So I thought, is there a way we can promote those people and do something for the NHS staff? And so the idea was I would put together the Splank Annual, and it sort of came fully formed as the idea. I would include advertisements at the back for anybody who wanted them, and any more or less any cartoonist who wanted to be involved could get involved. And I put messages out asking for material, and the response I got was excellent. So it's a mixture of, it's 160 pages. It will be a free digital download from, and I'm going to make sure I give you the right address, because I have it written down, from www.getmycomics.com, who have been brilliant, waived all fees, doing all the work that they need to do for nothing. 160 pages, digital download from them, lots of comic strips, a few pages of ads, a mixture of the original Splank issue 1, lot of brand new material, and strips that have been donated by people like Colin Matheson from Accent, Steve Tanner from Time Bomb, and John Freeman, who everybody knows from Down the Tubes. John's been a great help as well and been very supportive. So that's where it came from, and it took about 2 months to put together, and the last week or two was fairly hectic, but I'm hoping people like it, and I hope that it actually reflects what an old annual would have looked like. So that's the idea. It's maybe supposed to look like an old POW, and I'm aware that my Northern Ireland accent makes POW sound very odd, or Smash Annual. That's the whole idea.
But you've certainly got some good names in there. Obviously, working with John Freeman, you've got Smuzz. It was very nice to see people like Steve McManus supporting it, and a name that I know from the past, Dave Windett. You've got some Beano alumni, Gary Whitlock and Leslie Stanage, and of course Mike Higgs.
Yes, having Mike there is a real thrill. You know, it's as I said, as a 7-year-old, getting POW and then later Smash, I always turned to the Cloak first. It was this weird spy strip, and it was my favourite strip of all. So to have Mike not only draw me my favourite character from them, the Cloak, but to put me in the strip as the character, the Grumpy Penguin, who's on the cover of the annual as well, which is that was a real thrill.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to explain the Grumpy Penguin.
The Grumpy Penguin came about, and indeed the Ninja Monkey story came about when my nephew, while I was ill, managed to persuade me to be in his A-level film, that he had to make a film for his A-level. And he wrote a film about me as a penguin obsessive. And for most of the film, I am dressed in a penguin onesie. And one of my friends was in a monkey onesie, and one of my friends was in a red panda onesie. And so whenever the comic came about, we referred to them as the Animal Gang, and I am now the Grumpy Penguin, and I still have the onesie behind me. That's where that all came from. And those are the three main characters on the front cover, are Grumpy Penguin, Ninja Monkey, and Red Panda.
I believe it's actually being offered as a free download, but then can people donate through the Get My Comics website?
No, it is done as a free download, and that's because it's dual purpose. You know, if we're trying to promote the work of these cartoonists and get people to buy comics from them, or now is a brilliant time to commission special pieces of artwork from artists. You know, some of them have time, and they're really interested. So I've got a few pieces. You mentioned Dave Windett. I got a lovely piece of one of his characters beating up Ninja Monkey and Grumpy Penguin. So, it's a great time to do that. So we didn't want to charge. We wanted as many people as possible to see it. So it's free. And then we've set up a Just Giving page. And there will be links on the Get My Comics page. And there's then links on my own web pages, which covers Sector 13, Cthulhu Kids, and Splank. And I'm building off the Splank page a set of links to all of the artists who have contributed and to other of my friends, or indeed any artist who's interested, any comic creator who wants to have a link on that page. The links will be there. It's going quite slowly because my wife's found things to do in the garden for me, so that's holding up development of the web page. But that's it, and I hope people will download it, and I hope they will enjoy it. And I have to say, I think there are some absolutely spectacular pieces of work in there. And you mentioned as well, and I didn't go back on it, Steve McManus. Have to say that Steve was a great help, and what he's done for this is something a little bit special. I asked him, would he write a story that might have appeared as the text story in a Battle Summer Special or a Battle Annual, and he came up with an absolutely lovely story, which is brilliantly illustrated by Joseph McCafferty, who's one of our Sector 13 friends, who is a tremendous artist. Very different style than you might expect, but absolutely brilliant. And I think the Steve McManus story people will really enjoy.
Well, having now had an opportunity to read through the annual, I have to agree with you. There's some astonishing stuff in there. Steve's story, obviously, very good. But I think everyone has really given 100%. And, I hope it works out for you, and that they can find some work through it. And also the Just Giving page can be a success through it as well. My thanks to Peter for giving us a generous amount of time to have a chat. And I do hope that you'll give Splank a try. It costs nothing to read the comic, but there is a more serious purpose to promote both the artists and to try and attract a few donations to the charity. So I hope that once you've visited Get My Comics and downloaded your copy, you'll take a look at Peter's contributors page and maybe commission some artwork from them, and go to the Just Giving page and donate a little towards the NHS. Now, as anyone who's been following these videos will know, I've been working on two projects. The first is a comic book reprint in 2 volumes. I've been relettering that for some weeks now. The first volume is done. I'm a good way into the second volume. We had a bank holiday this weekend, and I did rather take it easy. Watched a few films and watched a few TV shows that we've had recorded for ages. But it was nice to have a couple of days off, and just relax. I have been doing some work. Obviously, I've been doing the relettering, and I've also been doing a little bit of research into the various artists that worked on the strip, and doing some more writing for Project 2, which will be more of a magazine-y kind of project. I've been writing some material about various artists for that over the last few weeks, and doing the research and writing those up. Each one can be a day's work. So that has taken me away from the relettering, which I actually feel that I really need to do the relettering. So Project 2 might be pushed to one side briefly while I concentrate on the relettering, because that is rather dragging on. And I'd like to get the books finished, proofed, and get the design started. I'm still looking at June for publication, so that's not too far away. And hopefully within the next week or two, I will be revealing both the titles and the covers of the 2 volumes. So what else have I been up to? Well, I've been watching a few films, as I mentioned, and one film kind of leading into another. Just before the lockdown, I picked up a copy of Barbarella, the science fiction film with Jane Fonda. And after watching that kind of led me into The China Syndrome, which he also stars in, and Clute. Clute was directed by Alan Pakula, which led me to The Parallax View, which is a paranoid thriller which I'd never watched before. It was mentioned recently by Mark Kermode. In the film, a reporter is investigating a strange business corporation which may be training assassins or have some other nefarious purpose. Anyway, after watching that, I ended up watching Failsafe, starring Walter Matthau, which was kind of a callback to the China Syndrome, which had starred his Odd Couple co-star, Jack Lemmon. So all these films are interwoven somehow. So I have been enjoying these old black and white movies, and therefore the next film I watched was Five Against the House, which is based on a Jack Finney novel. It's a heist movie about a group who want to rob a casino. I must admit I didn't actually think that much of it, but it did lead me to, and this will be my next film, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is also based on another Jack Finney novel. I did get sidetracked and ended up watching The Incredible Shrinking Man, directed by Jack Arnold, so that's going to push me in another direction of Jack Arnold movies, and I've also dug out a copy of It Came From Outer Space and Creature from the Black Lagoon. So that's how I'm choosing my movies at the moment. We've also been watching quite a lot of shows on TV, but mostly comedy stuff. It's lovely that things like The Last Leg are back. Have I Got News for You? QI is back this week, and we've just been trying to find humour in a lot of different places. There's also a number of shows being broadcast over YouTube, which I'd recommend. There's a show by Mark Olver called Who Said That? And another one hosted by Stu Goldsmith called The Infinite Sofa. If you like a laugh and you don't mind something being slightly shambolic, why would you be watching this if you didn't like something shambolic? But anyway, those two shows on both on YouTube, I thoroughly recommend. Okay, well, that's it for another week. Hopefully next week I'll be able to announce that I've done a ton of the re-lettering and that we're almost nearly there. If not, I may have to give doing these videos a miss for a week. However much I'm enjoying doing them, I really do need to get the work done. As always, I hope that you stay safe, and I will be back next week, hopefully, with more news and maybe another interview. I really don't know. It's going to be as much of a surprise to me as it will to you. All right, bye.